Hey there, welcome to the Digital Transformist. This is Mike LaVista. Today we have Damian Lacey on the podcast. He's with OE Partners from Melbourne, Australia. And we talk about everything from his company's focused on operational excellence to how that intersects with change management and artificial intelligence and what's happening with manufacturers around the world. It's really interesting stuff. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome to the Digital Transformist. This is Mike LaVista. I'm here with Damian Lacey today of OE Partners. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Here we are in the U.S. and near the end of our day, and you got up bright and early for me, so I do appreciate that over in Australia. So let's start with a little bit about how maybe let's talk about a little bit about what OE Partners does and maybe your story about how you got to be working with them.
Yeah, sure. No problem. Thank you, Michael. Great to be here with you. So OE stands for Operational Excellence. So Operational Excellence Partners, we work with predominantly medium-sized companies, small to medium-sized companies looking to grow, looking to improve productivity, sometimes reduce costs, but generally we're growing. Our processes and our systems don't really match the company trajectory that we're on, and we need to sort of organize, become more efficient. So we help them. We help them with that. Uh, to put it in simply.
Right.
Um, yeah, and a bit of a personal background. So mechanical engineer, worked in the automotive industry, worked in a company component supplier, Robert Bosch. They were starting out on a lean journey when I joined that company. So got involved with that team. I was part of that team and got involved in implementing the change associated, and I was kind of hooked ever since then. Post that, worked in Toyota. So I joined Toyota, where a lot of these principles come from around efficiency, productivity, the Toyota production system, that sort of thing. So I joined Toyota, worked there for a number of years, worked in Toyota City in Japan as well. Lots of cost reduction, lots of process improvement, that kind of stuff.
Okay, great.
And then founded
So
our OE partners a few years later.
that's great. So, a lot of times when we see on the technology side, when we see a company growing and there's a mismatch with how their tech systems and tech processes are working, there's some early warning signs like, they're copying and pasting, there's mistakes, error prone things seem to happen. It's tougher to onboard people. What are some of the early warning signs if people are listening who are in that small to medium business market who are growing? What are some of the early warning signs that you would see from an operational excellence point of view that'd be like, oh, this might be something to pay attention to as you grow and could be a problem later on?
Yeah, I mean, sure, there's telltale signs. Generally speaking, people engage with us because they're not as efficient as they want to be. They know they can't scale readily. The warning signs, they can be fairly clear. If you've got, um, you know, people doing jobs different ways depending on who's doing it. You've got the same process done by three people, it's done different ways. It's going to be tough to just try and bring in a new system and suddenly have it go all, smoothly. Um, the natural ones of lots of paperwork. Really, these days, it shouldn't be tolerated. There's the efficiency problem, but it's also then, if I see lots of paperwork, it means you're not readily capturing data with how people
Hmm.
are interacting with that paperwork. So you're losing insight, you're losing awareness as to how the business operates. Yeah, I mean, look, they're two pretty relevant ones, I think.
Yeah.
And look, I'd say probably go extend that a little bit more and say, the Excel spreadsheet is, becoming the piece of paper in the working world, right? And so, if
Yeah.
you're doing lots of stuff off system on an Excel spreadsheet, and it's taking a lot of time, um, look, a point analysis, a point insight. I want to find out this one thing once a year. Okay, sure, use
Right.
Excel. But if this is an operational activity, you're doing this every week where you need to extract something from a system, put it onto an Excel spreadsheet, spend time on that, that's a warning sign. That's
Yeah.
definitely a flag.
Well, that's great. Honestly, I think where our worlds overlap pretty significantly is that when we see an Excel sheet, at the center of an operational process, we know that it's error prone. It can, we've seen people, mailing around different versions of things, and you get out of sync. And there's a better way to do it. And I think you may have coined a phrase about that. Excel is today's paper. I think that's exactly right.
Yeah, yeah.
So tell me about you said something about, your clients typically show up knowing they can't scale. And I'm curious about that because I feel like a lot of times companies either aren't sure, or they tried some things, or there's been a stumble and a fall. What do you think? What have you seen maybe from like a psychological perspective? What
Mm.
do companies or CEOs go through as they sort of are trying to figure out if it now is the time or not, or they're making, a move and it's not working? What do you think that process is like?
Look, we deal with companies who raise their hand, right?
Mhm.
The company that's sitting there thinking they're doing great and they're winning the world, like they generally don't. So we don't have a perfect cross section of all companies in the economy. It's the ones that are proactive. They raise their hand. They want to reach to that next level. So it's a bit of a bias sample
Mhm.
in that regard. Um, but yeah, generally they have the desire to get to the next level, and they may even have made some initial steps. They've hit a revenue target. Let's say they've gone from 20 mil revenue up to 40 mil revenue, and the 40 mil revenue step actually resulted in more disorder, more chaos, for want of a better word, and poorer profitability.
Mhm.
And that leads them to wind back their approach and think, hang on, we need to do this a bit differently. We need to do more than just get more sales in the door. We need to put down some foundations first. So that's a pretty typical scenario, or one
That's
of.
interesting. What do you see as the most common places you end up starting your work? Like
Sorry, say that again.
within a maybe the most common department or area or kind of task or work stream that you think you get involved with the most or first.
Yeah. Look, it's generally operations for us, operations and supply chain. So mostly those sort of mid-tier companies that are looking to get to the next level. It's not about sales per se,
Mhm.
It's how do we execute? How do we execute? And it's our operations and our supply chain that are really constraining the growth. So that's generally where we start more broadly. Um, in some instances, it's across the chain of events, multiple product lines and, the whole chain of events from order capture, requirements, some design and estimating, um, quoting, quoting, material supply, manufacture, install. It could be the whole chain, or it could be we've got one key area that's really the kink in the pipe, and we want to zoom in there first, demonstrate the approach, and then move on. Sort of say 50-50, those two scenarios, the
Okay.
broad or the narrow.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's funny. I find sometimes when we start narrow on like it's almost like, so, with a doctor and a patient, a patient can come into the doctor's office and they think that the problem is with their ankle, and it turns out it's something else related to that, further upstream. And so for us, we do try to take a bigger picture view first so we can drill in. I'm curious, does that analogy work for the kind of work that you do too?
It really does. Yeah, it really does. And generally the approach we initially take is a good value stream map and view of the organization. So yeah, the symptoms in a business generally change with the day. Today it's my ankle, now it's my hip, now I've got a
Yeah.
shoulder. I seem to have a headache. It can it can shift all the time, using the medical analogy, and so that's generally what drives that feeling of chaos within a business, that a management team think, oh, it's just one fire after the next and there's no way of getting control. Whereas, you know, if you can take an analytical approach, get some data to match to back up your understanding of what's going on in this business, you can then start to get some clarity and say, yes, there are more than one thing. There are, the things to tackle here. There could be 5 things, but you have to focus and hit them, in order of priority.
Yeah.
And that's the path out. That's the path out of chaos.
Well, you mentioned something I love looking at too, which is, we can't make good decisions if we don't have good data. And I wonder if you have a story of a time that, you went into an organization, did some data and process analysis and found like a real gem and had some kind of a really compelling outcome. Does anything like that come to mind for you?
Yeah, there's a couple, but I mean, I'll start it with just a contrarian view there a little bit. Like sometimes you don't need data to make the right decision. You you don't need to see the New England School of Medicine's medical journal uh, results to know that you need to brush your teeth every day, right? Or to eat your vegetables. You don't need to see a peer-reviewed study, right, to prove that fact out for you. But sometimes um, I see management teams looking to prove out those sort of things where it's like, no, no, your operation is a mess, and you need to do you need to implement some structured workplace organization here, or you know um, we need to start pulling numbers out of the system, looking at those numbers every day, every week, and acting on it. Oh, I'm not sure about that. I don't know if that's a good
Yeah.
idea. That No, no, just do that. Don't overthink that. So that's and in some instances, there's complicated software brought to bear where to tell you an insight, which if you walk out onto the shop floor, you can see it straight away.
Yeah.
Let's say it's a warehousing operation, and you walk out onto the dock and you see piles of pallets in the receivables area. How long have they been there? Yeah, they've been there a couple of days. So it's clogging up a clear, inward and outward point. It's causing inefficiency. You don't need a lot of analysis. That's a problem. You need to clear that in within 2 hours, right?
Yeah.
Because
Well, it's
every hour
funny.
it's there, it's causing inefficiency.
I appreciate you continuing my medical analogy, because as I'm thinking about this, a lot of times we go and thinking, oh, great, let's look at what they have so we can, figure out what we need to change. And sometimes it's the case that, you look at we do a value stream map as well. And you realize that, well, it turns out the problem is that people just don't follow the process they already had. And they've already kind of solved this problem. And the
Mm,
real problem is, for some reason people are doing something different. We see it in Excel sheets and, these phantom processes that go around things. And it turns out they've already solved the problem. And really the issue is, can we just get back down to what our actual process is?
yeah,
Sounds
just
like that's something
execute with
you've run into
discipline.
as well.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. It does happen where the solution was worked out previously. It's just been forgotten or ignored. And look, I think some of the symptoms for that are that the view that the work is chaotic, and it's different every day, and we can't pin down process, and you know uh, that can be a symptom for it.
Hmm.
And the people who excel in those environments are the people that get promoted, and they don't have a problem with firefighting because they're pretty good firefighters.
Yeah.
Um, so it kind of rewards the wrong kind of skills, and it can encourage a culture where the process doesn't need to be followed. It's actually quick thinking, on your feet, point solutions.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's interesting. You said something I've thought about before, which is this idea that some people resist turning something into a process because they like that firefighter mentality, and
Mm,
even will say, as you said, that it's not possible to do. And in a way, as a business, what you're looking for is a way to systematize it. You're looking for a way to
yeah.
make it repeatable and safe and predictable. And I find some organizations grow to a size and stop or hit a ceiling because of that kind of mentality. And I'm
Mm,
curious, like, so what do you do to unwind that and turn to a more process driven approach?
yeah. I mean, facts and data is the simple answer to that scenario. And look, there's some good ways of showing how the current state is, and whilst it feels like chaos, it is a system
Hmm.
that has steps and rules. Um, you know, and we do a lot of work in what you describe as job shop processes. So job shop manufacturing, but even in professional services, where the process steps that the work flows through, let's say there's, I don't know, 12 process steps that the work flows through. And for some jobs, it goes through 6 of those processes. For some jobs, it goes through all 12. And sometimes there's an order of one, sometimes there's an order of 300, right?
Mhm.
So the requirements are different all the time. We do a lot of work with, say, prefabricated construction. So it's a module, it's a physical building module. Now the configuration that's different every time, right?
Yeah.
So it can feel day to day, it can feel very chaotic and different. Um, and it's not immediately obvious, right? This is now refuting my previous example where you can walk out and see the answer straight away. In those kinds of dynamic environments, you can't walk out onto the shop floor
Yeah.
and just see, oh, on a Tuesday afternoon, that's the problem. We just need to unlock that process. No, because the bottleneck shifts during the course of the day, during the course of the week, and it's in different spots. So how do you get out of that, though? How do you get out of that? You need to look at data. You need to look at process over a certain period of time. It could be 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, and see, look, it moves around and it feels chaotic, but on average, most often, the issues are here first and
Mhm.
foremost, and then here, and there's usually like a top three, right?
Yeah.
And so showing that to the team and saying, we're going to park these other 9 issues and we're going to focus here on this one process and get that better and then move to the next and sort of step them through it in a workmanlike fashion.
And is there an 80-20 kind of principle where, you can get a lot of your impact from just fixing some of those few biggest problem points? Does that apply, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. Because, you can quite easily get you and some of your colleagues together and talk about process and how do we get more productivity. And you'll fill a whiteboard of, 30 things that are the problem or an issue, but not all of those are going to make any impact on the financial performance of the business, right? Because they're not at the constraint, they're not at where the bottleneck is.
Mhm.
So yeah, you'll get most of your efforts. You'll get all your efforts at the constraint, and so yeah, there's an outsized impact on
Yeah.
attacking those problems first.
Yeah, it's funny. If I were to give like an idea to people listening who are thinking about doing this, I have found when teams come up with process improvements to put on that metaphorical whiteboard, they tend to
Mm,
always come up with these, not always, but a lot of the suggestions are these really edge case situations that happen once or twice a year, or they happened five
yes.
years ago. And now all of a sudden, as
Yeah.
technologists, we're thinking about maybe building a system to solve this really long tail edge case, or even sometimes it's like, this costs a not expensive employee's time 3 hours a week, and it's actually fine. And so
It's
some of the
fine.
some of the solutions are just erase those off the whiteboard and let's focus, to your point, look for the constraint where we can open up something further downstream. And for
Mm,
some reason, people really get tied up in thinking about the edge cases because they're fun, they're more interesting, and that boring
yeah.
80% is really dull. Seems like that resonates for you?
Yeah, absolutely. There's that personal frustration metric, and that
Yeah,
rate's really high on that personal frustration metric,
yeah,
and so therefore it's really important. I mean, look, you might cherry pick some of those lower business impact but higher personal impact issues, and solve them first to build some goodwill. So you might make it so that the team is enjoying the process because
yeah,
you fixed that process step and it's less labor intensive, it's less physically demanding or
yeah,
stressful. But yeah, that's at best like a short term kind of change management initiative. It's not the path forward. Um, But yeah, I'll just follow up with another example. You do get scenarios, and I'm thinking in particular some work that we did with a software company where, you know, the process is run by the development engineers, and they're excited about the product and the functionality and new features, and steaming ahead to push the boundaries of what the product does. But in the meantime, customers are churning because of the basic functionality, the bugs that are just
Yeah,
interrupting them. And they
yeah.
don't care about feature number, 37. It's the top 10 features that don't work
Mhm.
consistently. That's the real problem.
That's a really great point. And I hate to say it, as an engineer, it's like when too often the engineers lead the process, or lead the product,
Yeah.
and they forget about that normal, really boring use case that pays for all the bills. And it's hard because that's, you want to stay engaged, you want your job and your day to be interesting as a developer, and sometimes
Yeah.
you know just making sure the math works. Oh, it's an extra zero. No, this really matters right now. That
Yeah,
can be a
exactly.
challenge. Well, so what are some of the trends in technology or even AI that you're looking at as you are interacting with these small and medium manufacturers that are kind of using new tools?
Yeah, look, I mean, small to medium manufacturing, it's a pretty, no BS space, right?
Mm.
There's just no time to go on flights of fancy and chase trends. It's very hard nosed, and people are brutal, right? This will make me money or it won't, and if I make that decision within 5 minutes, I'm out, right?
Mm.
Um, so it's a good sort of reality check around what works and what doesn't. So, you know, it, technology definitely adopting, lots of business systems that work and integrating more of a best of breed approach rather than a one big box solution. They're pretty. It's pretty clever space. Um, so they'll integrate, a CRM with a warehouse management system with the transport management system because it works for them. Um, in terms of AI, yeah, I mean, look, there's the obvious ones, ChatGTP, and their that cohort of large language models that's definitely being used on a day to day basis. I think still though the clear use cases for other tools, I think that's still evolving for the SME market in Australia. There's there's few killer apps that are really kind of transforming the landscape. Um, yeah, and it's going to be pretty hard nosed and pragmatic in terms of their adoption. There's a lot of hype. There's a lot of
Yeah.
different promises being made. Um, but yeah, I mean, one thought though that comes to mind is there's definitely an enormous amount of opportunity um, to feed in your operational data and streamline your processes and use AI. Like that opportunity is there.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that's where I go to. I think it's it's looking at ways to know more about your data that in the past would have taken some more expensive tools, and frankly now a copy and paste might get you some answers that could point you in a direction that was inaccessible before. Um, and I wonder, you see a lot of talk about white collar jobs going away. It does seem, the analog would be, robotics and other things, but that seems like still probably out of reach for SME, or maybe you tell me that's different. But it seems like the physical version of the manifestation of AI is a little further away for those kinds of businesses. Does that seem true, or what would you say
I
about
think
that?
so. I think so. It's coming. It's definitely coming. It's just will the rate be as rapid as
Yeah,
the hype cycle suggests? I've got questions about that. Um, it's still you still as a business owner, as a senior management team, need to come up with a logical problem and a coherent use case
yeah,
to get to get that out, get that application. And I think the real power, as you said, your processes, your data. Um, I think people are going to find eventually that they really need to start cleaning up their data,
Mhm.
to really unlock the power of, um, like the robot analogy. Yeah, okay, we can get a robot, but what if you don't have power? If you're not hooked up to the grid, you can't actually plug that power, that robot in and get the value of it. And I think it's kind of be the situation with data, that it's never been such an issue before, but it will be more and more, getting really clear and logical, and disciplined about your data.
Yeah.
Um, that'll become more and more important, I think, and it'll be a stumbling block.
I think that's great, and I think if we tie in some things we talked about already, or we find organizations that have used things like spreadsheets and other things that are outside the system, your data
Mm,
becomes just much more difficult for any other future system to use. So if you're a growing smaller enterprise, think about the idea that it's time to enforce rules around what data goes in. We have lots of we have customers where there are 1,000 single time SKUs that were created for one-off projects, and really they
yep,
could have all been the same thing, and really like not being careful about their data because it didn't seem to matter. Well, now the idea
that's
should
right.
be your
Mm,
data will matter in the future. So cleaning it up and like really creating a process that again seems like you couldn't create a process, especially for salespeople, but you can. Let's find a
mm.
way to systemize things so that our data is better in the future. I think you made a really great point about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not exciting, but I think, the future is for those with OCD. I think those with OCD will prosper,
Yeah.
or at least organizations that, have those kind of tendencies will do really
Yeah.
well.
That's really great. Hey, well, listen. Well, thanks for spending some time here talking about these issues. Always great to get another perspective. For people that want to hear more about OE Partners, what's the best way to find you online?
Yeah, look, the easiest way is probably LinkedIn. Do a search, Damian Lacey, OE Partners, will pop up. Yeah, feel free to connect and send me a message. That's probably the best way.
Well, great. Again, thanks for being on the show, and hope to talk again soon.
Great. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks for listening to the Digital Transformist. This is Mike LaVista, and if you like that content, subscribe so you can get notified of new content when it comes out.